Well, I'll tell you what I read this week. Do you know in Chicago, of all cities, they have a grandmother hotline? Did you all know that? You can call Grandma if you're in trouble or if you need wisdom, and they get 8,000 calls a month, mostly from young teens from 12 to 16 years old who just need to talk to Grandma. The phone bank is hosted by a number of retired ladies who sit there, and they have become the grandmas to Chicago. So if you need to just gotta talk to Grandma, you can call the Chicago Emergency Grandma line. I read that this week in the news, and I thought, wow, I'm gonna set up an emergency pastor line. So if you're nuts and going crazy, call Tom and he'll tell you how stupid you are. Paul writes to Timothy. The reason he wrote to Timothy is because Timothy was in trouble. He had a ministry that was at best falling apart, shaky. Everything was going wrong. He was being persecuted for it. Even the members of his own church were abandoning him and criticizing him, mostly because he was a young man and they were older. Everything was just terrible to where Timothy was ready to quit. He was going to leave the ministry, and Paul began to write letters to him to encourage him, saying, hold up there, buddy. You're a minister of the Lord. What you do is no small thing. Your faith should be paramount in your life, as it was, and we get the reference here, in your mother and in your grandmother. So hang in there with this strong faith. Remember what Mom and Grandma taught you. Well, what does godly women teach their children? Or what do godly women teach their children? First, I think they teach them to be people who care. More children, every generation care only for themselves, right? Remember when Mom used to say, now you share that with, who shares anymore? Nobody does. You don't believe me? Get one basketball, 10 kids, and throw the ball out there and see who gets it. One kid will think he's Michael Jordan. He'll hold it the whole time. Everybody else is going, here, here, here. Well, that's all they're doing. Here, here, here. Because it's never coming their way. Kids don't share anymore. Kids don't care anymore about anybody, really, but themselves, right? But you remember the old days? I'm talking about Shirley's days, not mine. The old days where Mom cared about everybody and taught their kids to care about everybody. On my weekly blog, I put a lesson in there a little while ago, and I said that if you had three things, an egg, a carrot, and some coffee beans, what can you learn from them? This is not my story. This is a story I read. Well, a young woman came to her mother's house, and she was upset, and she was fussing and, being miserable, and she was telling Mom about how miserable her life was. So Mom said, come with me, and took her into the kitchen, sat her down at the kitchen table, and she put 3 pots of water on the stove and turned it on high until they were boiling. And in one she put an egg, and one she put a carrot, and one she put some coffee beans. She sat down and for the next 45 minutes let those things boil while she listened to her daughter tell her about her life is miserable, her husband was miserable, her children were miserable, the school was miserable, her job was miserable. In fact, the entire planet was miserable. And she's the only one that knew anything or cared about anything because the rest of the world was horrible. Mom listened quietly, never said a word. And you're thinking, well, gosh, say something, Mom. Don't you care? And she just sat and listened, and don't you care? Well, after 45 minutes, Mom went over, turned off the stove, took the 3 pots of water, got 3 little bowls. In the first bowl, she spooned out the egg, put it in the first bowl. Second bowl, she spooned out the carrot, put it in the second bowl. In the third bowl, she dumped the coffee into the bowl, and she came over and she put them before her daughter, and said, what do you see there? The daughter responded, I see an egg, a carrot, and some coffee. Is that all you see? Said, no, Mom, what do you see? Mom says, well, you've got 3 articles here, three things. Each one was exposed to the same tribulation, the boiling water, same persecution. The carrot that was so strong and tough before allowed the water to boil it down to nothing. And she took her thumb and said, "Watch this," and she just mushed the carrot. That which was once strong is now just nothing to be walked over. Said the egg, which was once weak and fragile, has been boiled and now is hard. And because we overcooked it, it's dry and it's bitter. But the coffee beans, in essence, have remained unchanged. In fact, not only are they still intact, but they took the persecuting boiling water and made it a fragrant and beautiful drink. All three were exposed to the same persecution. "Tell me something," asked the mother to the daughter. "Which one are you? When life gets tough and the job goes wrong and people treat you mean, which one are you when the heat comes on, the persecution starts to cook you? Which one are you? Do you just fall apart and become mush? Do you become dried out and bitter? Or do you change the situation? So fill it with love that it becomes a lovely and fragrant drink that everybody can enjoy. Because you have all three options available to you. When life gets hard and the marriage isn't so good and you had a bad day and you're sick and your tooth hurts and your hair's falling out and everybody's telling you that, boy, you have a pretty face. It's your attitude we can't stand. When the heat's on, which one are you? Godly mothers care. And they teach their children not just to care for others, but to care for themselves. And they influence their children to be better ladies. You know what's feminine about the feminist... Let's rewind that. You know what's feminine about the feminist movement today? Nothing! Nothing! Our women are not women anymore. They're, I don't know what they are. What do you call them today? Entities. They are entities. I remember growing up back in the 50s and the 60s when women carried themselves with grace and beauty. And they dressed for every occasion, even around the house. My father would come home and my mom would be dressed up, lipsticked, and ready to go. Boom, 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 boom. Of course, I was a little guy. I didn't understand all that at the time. Still don't, honestly. But I'm just saying, women used to care about themselves and everybody else around them. And godly mothers would pass this on to their daughters. Be the same kind of woman. Carry yourself in grace and beauty. And even when the heat is on, fragrance it with your love, so much so that it becomes a joyful drink for all to enjoy, not a disaster or a bitter, dried out, miserable individual. Paul writes to Timothy, "I know the faith within you. I know the kindness you possess, because I've known it in your mom and I've known it in your grandmother. As they have taught you, continue in that, O Christian." What makes you different from every other person on this planet? You call yourself a Christian. Okay, fine. What makes you different? Because you're the coffee beans. You're the one filled with God's love, and that love, even when the heat is on, should be purveying itself throughout all of your being and all of your relationships. Secondly, I think moms, the Christian mom makes tough decisions. There's a book written by James Dobson. It's called Tough Love. Any of you ladies ever read that? Oh, yeah. Especially if you had one of those unruly children like Robert Land. Not really. He was a cupcake. It was Shannon that was a pain in the neck. You ever read the Tough Love book? As much as you want to be the coffee bean in every situation, every once in a while you got to pick up the stupid stick and whack them with it. Because kids can get just that ornery. And there's no sin there. You got to make a tough decision. I just read a story that happened actually last year. I was unaware of it. I was just on the internet walking around, and Jane Napoli. Jane Napoli is the woman. She's a single mom of 3 kids, very poor, not much. But she and another lady own an old little fishing boat. Not much of a boat at all, just an old wooden clunker. They live in San Francisco, and they go out usually in the early evening, and they fish all night, and they come back in, and then they pull up to the docks there on San Fran Bay. You got all the docks and the fish houses and that stuff, and they sell what they can, and that's how she makes a living, because she's an unskilled single mom. She got 3 children that are starving to death. She and this other lady together. And that's what they do day after day, night after night, day after day, night after night. They try and sleep during the day and stay with their kids and take care of them and put the kids to school. And then at night, they're fishermen, or fisher ladies in this case. They were coming back into San Francisco Harbor, and they saw, or they were witnessed, a tanker hit one of those big tourist boats. You know, the tourist boats where all the people pile in, they float them around San Francisco Bay and all that stuff. A tanker hit the tourist boat and just crushed it. And it sank almost immediately. And there was a big fire and everything, and people were in the water. Well, I don't know if you've ever been to San Francisco, but that's not a friendly bay. No. You can't just jump out and swim across it. That's why Alcatraz was what it was, because anybody tried to jump out and swim, currents carried them away, and they usually drowned 99% of the time. 70, 80, 90, 100 people in the water, all splashing and screaming and crying, some crushed, some already dead. And these 2 ladies were just coming in to see all this, and she had to make a decision. So what they did, and the press got hold of this, and what they did is they had about 1,200 pounds of fish that they'd been catching all night long and everything else, and they threw it all overboard so that they could save people. Those 2 ladies ended up saving 70 individuals off that boat. 70. In their stupid little boat. Back and forth they went, rescuing people. 70 people. Even though they found out, the press got the story, even though they found out that she was being evicted from her ghetto apartment because she couldn't pay the rent. 1,200 pounds of fish in the water, so that they could eventually end up saving 70 individuals off that tourist boat. That's a hard decision when your children are hungry and you're getting booted out of your apartment. Godly moms can make that decision. What's more important? My kids will still be hungry, we'll still be evicted. But there's 70 people here who may die, probably will die, if I don't act. Could you make that decision? I don't know. Some people just keep their fish and float on by and say, oh, well, not my problem. Because that's the kind of people we're raising today. She was a godly woman, and she could not let that happen. Godly moms know. They know to care about the individuals, and they know to teach their children to care about themselves. Godly moms will make the hard decision when their kids or whatever start going down a wrong road. And say there's things that are more important than this or that. There are things that have severe consequences. Even to the point where life can be lost if you don't make the hard decision. But see, godly moms filled with the Spirit of the Lord have the priority before them. The priority is Christ and everybody else. Finally, I think godly moms pray for their children. How many of you moms pray for your children? I'll bet you do. You better start praying even harder nowadays. I want to read you a story. This is an old story. Have you ever heard the names of Monica and Patricius Augustus? Of course not. They lived back in 331 AD. Monica and Patricius Augustus, he was a ex-Roman soldier. This is after Rome fell and everything. And she was a mom. and they had 3 boys. 2 were raised to be pretty good boys. 1 was a hellion. In trouble all the time, in fights all the time, running the streets, carrying weapons, robbing people. And it was this child that was bringing the whole family into trouble. So Mom decided that she was going to build a prayer wall around him. A prayer wall. I said, what in the heck is that? Well, she was going to pray for him every day, and each day would be a plank or another shield, another wall around this boy. And she kept praying for this boy, praying for this boy, and praying for this boy. He wouldn't go to church. He wouldn't be part of the Christian movement that she was. So she built a prayer wall around him. And in fact, he even told her, knock it off, Mom. And she wouldn't, she prayed for that boy, prayed for that boy, prayed for that boy, all the way around. Well, 2 weeks before she died, her son, the 3rd son that was a hellion, finally gave his life to Jesus Christ and joined their little church. His name was Augustus, who would later become St. Augustine, because Mom wouldn't let him go. Mom would not turn him over or hand him over to Satan. Mom would not give him to the world. So she did all she could do. She talked and she spanked and she worked and she did everything she could do for the boy, until finally she said, I will build a prayer wall around him. And let this be God's problem. That boy became St. Augustine, one of the greatest theologians of that era. In fact, there's a book today that Augustine wrote called Imitation of Christ. How to live a godly lifestyle from a hellion. Mom, never underestimate what you can do in your child's life. Never underestimate the power of prayer, the power of care, the power of a good, even though it be a hard decision. Because Mom, that's what makes you Mom. The old cliche, the hand that rocks the cradle does what? Rules the world. Sadly, too many mothers are no longer rocking the cradles. We just put them in front of a computer screen and say, play games. The privilege of motherhood. I want to close with one final story. I don't know if you'll like this or not. It's a poem, actually, that was written by an ancient fella. I don't know the author. There was no author listed. It just said author unknown. But it talks about all moms, no pain. All moms, no pain. Long, long ago, or so I've been told, 2 saintly ladies met on the streets paved with gold. By the stars in your crown, said one to the other, I can see on earth that you were a mother. And she responds with, by the blue-tinted halo I see that you wear, you also have known sorrow and despair. Ah, yes, came the answer, I once had a son, a sweet little lad full of laughter and fun. But tell of your child. Oh, I knew I was blessed from the first moment I held him close to my breast. And my heart almost burst with the joy of that day. Ah, yes, the other mother sighed. I felt the same way. The former continued. The first steps he took, so eager and breathtaking, a sweet startled look, which came over his face. He trusted me so. Ah, yes, sighed the other mother. How well do I know? But soon he had grown to a bright, handsome boy, so stalwart and kind, gave me such joy just to have him walk down the street next to my side. Ah, yes, sighed the other mother. I knew that same pride. How often I shielded him and spared him from pain. And when he for others was so cruelly slain, they crucified him and they spat in his face. I would have gladly taken his place. A moment of silence. So you are she the mother of Christ, and she fell on one knee. The Blessed One raised her up and drew her near, and kissed from the face of the woman a tear. Please tell me the name of your Son that you loved so, that I may share your grief and your woe. And she lifted her eyes straight at the other and said his name was Judas, and I was his mother. Wow. The godly mother that rocks the cradle will, in fact, rule her world. Never underestimate what you do, ladies, when you get up early in the morning and care for a screaming child and take care of 6 snotty noses and have to read that book for the 917th time. Because each move you make, each act you engage, you impart your love or your hate into that child that the rest of the world will deal with. Let us pray. In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and by your Holy Spirit, dear Lord, I ask your best blessings upon all these moms. Grandmas, moms, anybody who has influence in another child's life. Bless them, so fill them with love that they can in fact be the Christian coffee beans of this earth and flavor everything they are and ever will be with that same love. In the example of Jesus, our Christ, who lifted mothers beyond glory, we pray in his name. Bless them. Amen.